Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Today we are reading chapter 20, and this is part 4 of the book titled The Glastonbury Connection. And in chapter 19, we talked about or learned about from Ilariel the fact that the child of Joshua and Mary Magdalene she was not conceived in the traditional way. She was conceived through what they call light conception. So they were asked at the end of the chapter. Joanna wanted to know more about this. So that is what chapter 20 is going to be about. So we will be talking to Ilariel again, or hearing from Ilariel. Chapter 20, Light Conception and DNA. Ilariel. It is important to understand how a light-conceived child is created. The mother provides the basic DNA. The father provides an imprint of consciousness at a subtle level. And the spirit gives the ability to create new life. This involves activating a sequence of 12 DNA encodements, which work together to initiate the process of conception. And so he's also explaining the way that Jeshua was conceived. The spirit also balances and integrates the DNA so that the child does not have any kind of health problems that your scientists are now encountering with cloning. Because of this involvement by the spirit, the health and constitution of a light-conceived child will be stronger than that of most children. And if you read or followed along with me in Mary's message to the world, she talks about how Jesus was always healthy as a child. And many people asked, how do you keep him so healthy? This was at a time when sickness and disease was running rampant. And she didn't really know how to explain it. She just explained that he was just a naturally very physically healthy child. In order to understand the father's part in light conception, it is necessary to look at DNA and explore its real nature. DNA exists on various levels, and some levels of the DNA carry keys to consciousness instead of acting as physical markers and indicators. And if you want to know really deeply about this process of creation and DNA and how God plays a role in it, or mother, father, divine consciousness, however you like to refer to him, you should listen to letter 5 in the Christ letters, because it is broken down in its most deepest and complex way, but it is worth listening to, even if you don't feel like you are taking it in right away intellectually. It is something that deep down we all know. All of this it's just a remembrance. So when they say understand the father's part, they're literally talking about the father, other half of mother, not Father God. All right. There are interdimensional layers of DNA which stimulate openness, awareness, and subtle abilities, like abstract thought. These higher layers of DNA open the door to aspects of consciousness and establish connections, so that these aspects can be explored and worked with. These levels of DNA hold the imprint of man as a cultural and spiritual being, as the lower levels hold his imprint as a physical being. The higher levels of DNA, including sequences that have not yet been encoded or decoded by your scientists, are the ones that carry the consciousness of the Father during the process of light conception. You tend to see DNA as a basic transmitter of physical characteristics and tendencies, whereas it is really a comprehensive, multidimensional information system. Your DNA not only indicates physical parameters, but also your total potential as an intellectual, cultural, and spiritual being. The multidimensional levels of DNA sketch out your potential for awareness, sensitivity, and subtle abilities of consciousness. You may not choose to develop the areas outlined in this way, but they are there for you in potential. In that sense, your DNA is a complete outline of potential, a blueprint of how far you can develop if you choose to do so. Basically, the lower level of the DNA functions on, the greater will be the input from the parents. Physical DNA has a great deal of parental input in it, whereas the multidimensional DNA functioning at higher levels reflects the qualities and expressions of the soul. The DNA as a whole lays down parameters for development. It's a kind of growth chart showing your potential at all levels. Now that we have discussed the complexity of DNA, you are in a position to think clearly about Sarah Anna, and assess her real significance. That was the name of Jeshua and Mary Magdalene's daughter. Sarah Anna is spiritually the child of Jeshua and Mary Magdalene, but genetically the child of Mary alone, as only one set of physical level DNA. The set, which comes from the mother, is involved in light conception. Those who believe that there are descendants of Jeshua still alive on earth carrying his DNA at the physical level have not understood the reality of this complex situation. Although little is known in the world about light conception, it was certainly known as a principle in the esoteric groups of Jeshua's day, and was spoken of in the mystery schools of that time. Nor was it as rare as some people have thought, for a number of people close to Jeshua were conceived in this way. Mariana, Mary Magdalene, and John the Baptist were all light conceived. And if you consider the disciples of Jeshua, Sarah, the wife of Philip, and Miriam, the daughter of Rebekah, were light conceived too. During a session with Kathy Welchman in October 2006, we had the opportunity to continue these investigations with Ilariel. Kathy was trained as a biologist, and she was able to frame specific questions, which helped us to explore light conception in greater detail. So now Kathy is speaking to Ilariel. How does light conception occur at a DNA level? Ilariel, there must be 2 double strands of DNA for the process to work. That is clearly and widely understood. The question is, how do you produce 2 double strands if you're dealing genetically with only 1 double strand from the mother? So she has her double strand in place. Now, how does the rest of the DNA assemble? Well, the spirit has to do that. It has to produce another double strand of DNA, which curls around the mother's strands of DNA to create the child. And Kathy asks, on a physical level? And Ilariel says, yes, ultimately on the physical level. But it goes down through all the levels until it can reach the physical. There are many frequencies of being from the spirit down to the physical level, and through focusing on each frequency in turn, the spirit cloaks itself further and further into materiality. Another way of expressing this is to say that the light crystallizes or solidifies itself down until it manifests as the full substance of physical DNA. This is not spirit creating DNA, but spirit becoming DNA. Kathy, so it keeps going down. Ilariel, the light keeps going down until it reaches the physical level. Kathy, so in effect, it is like a physical mating of a male and female on the physical level. And Ilariel says, no physical male is involved, or to be more exact, he has contributed some higher level DNA, consciousness level DNA, but no physical DNA through a mating process. Kathy, so when it gets down into a physical human, the light has solidified and become physical male DNA, she's asking. And Ilariel says, exactly. The operation of the spirit working down through the levels manifests at the final level in physical form. What is then produced is another double strand of DNA, which matches up with the mother's strand. From that point on, the sequence proceeds along conventional lines, but it has to reach that point. There are also minor adjustments to strengthen the DNA and see that no weakness that might have come from the mother's side causes the child unnecessary illnesses. So it is an enhanced DNA. It's not like a conventional mating process. The DNA is improved it's enhanced. This produces a much stronger and better human being. Kathy, so where does the physical masculine DNA have its starting point so that it can give physical characteristics to a baby? Otherwise, it would be a clone and would look exactly like its mother. Ilarial. The second strand of DNA has its starting point within the spirit. Light goes down a series of steps until it finally becomes physical matter. This is a very subtle process, is it not? And Kathy says, yes. And what's the purpose of it? Ilarial. The purpose is to produce a much stronger and clearer consciousness embodied in a physical form. It's a much stronger body than the average, and it won't get ill so often because there are very few causes of possible illness within the DNA. It will still be a human body, but a much stronger than average one. Kathy, but why is this done? Ilarial. If there is a very advanced soul who wishes to experience human life, that soul would be vibrating at too high a level to incarnate through a conventional mating process. Beings who resonate with desire are born through a desire-based process. Beings who are beyond desire cannot be born in that way, as the process itself would be incompatible with their consciousness. In order to come into incarnation, a being needs in its vibrational frequency to reflect the vibration of that being's consciousness. Hence, advanced high vibration beings can only incarnate in advanced high vibration ways. Kathy, so is the spirit on the male side that is bringing down the physical DNA the father as well as the child? And Ilarial says, the spirit becomes the child, but where the father has a part in this is that he provides an imprint of consciousness through his spiritual partnership and collaboration with the mother. Through the process of living, not through one single act, but through the whole process of living together and sharing a spiritual partnership, he contributes high and subtle levels of DNA. But this is at the level of consciousness, not at the physical level. Kathy says, no, I don't mean that. I mean, if you are a spirit, an advanced soul wanting to come to Earth, and you put your DNA down to mix with the woman, do you become the child as well as being the father? I would have never thought to ask a question like that. Ilarial says, when we're talking about spirit here, we're talking about the spirit with a capital S, not the spirit of an individual soul. The spirit as a transpersonal source of energy goes down through all levels so that an incoming soul can incarnate because the DNA is complete right down to the physical level. It is not the incoming soul that does all of this. It is not the father that does all this. It is the spirit with a capital S as a transpersonal energy that does all this. This is the element in light conception that people find most confusing. They are thinking in personal terms, whereas this process begins at the transpersonal level. Kathy, so who is the real father of Jeshua? Ilarial, the real father of Jeshua is the spirit, in the same way that the real father of Mary Magdalene is the spirit. Not an individual spirit, but the transpersonal spirit. The divine energy. So basically coming directly from God, from the source, rather than coming through a living person and then mating with the woman. It is directly from God. That's how I'm taking it. Kathy, so that spirit wasn't Jeshua making his own way down into matter? Ilarial, what is your question exactly about the birth of Jeshua? Kathy, I'm trying to find out how spirit makes it possible for Jeshua to be born by light conception, how this process is related to Jeshua himself. Ilarial, I see your question. Jeshua is related to spirit, which causes this light conception in the same way as you are related to spirit. You are a spark from the one flame. Let us call spirit the one flame. You are a spark of the one flame as every human being is, as Jeshua is. When he is born, the one flame, the transpersonal spirit, facilitates this process. at the end of which a double strand of DNA is created, a strand that matches up with the double strand from the mother. So that is the process, and in that sense, any light-conceived child is directly the son or daughter of God, whereas all other human beings are indirectly the sons or daughters of God. But even a light-conceived child is not the only son or only daughter of God. All human beings share ultimately in this same state of being. We are touching here upon the misunderstanding in the original theology of the early church fathers, which has caused so much confusion. So it is the Spirit that manages and overlights the whole process. For the very most advanced and highest vibration soul, this is the only way they can get into a physical body. Kathy. So in other words, the process isn't controlled by what we would call a spiritual being, an angel. It's simply a process. And Delariel says, it's a process controlled by the Spirit. If you wish to interpret the Spirit as an angel, you can, of course, but we don't see it that way. We see Spirit as an aspect of God, and that is Spirit with a capital S. Kathy. So how would Jeshua decide? What would he do? All right, he has been chosen to manifest on earth and to be light conceived. What would he do to allow that to happen? And Ilariel says, once it has been decided that Jeshua will manifest in this way, a team of angels facilitates this process. To make sure the timing is right, the mother is available at the right place and the right time. This is not something that happens in an arbitrary or random way. A team of angels will be involved in the planning of this process. Kathy, normally a soul would choose to go to a couple having had sex, man and wife together. But that process comes up with many diseases and genetic problems, so more of a statement she's making. And Delariel says, yes, there are many limitations. The whole point about light conception is to eliminate most of the limitations. So what the child is very much stronger. Kathy, so why aren't all humans born by light conception? And Ilariel says they haven't earned the right to be, not yet. Kathy, what do they need to do to earn that right? And Ilariel says they need to become very high vibrational beings, and most human beings have not done that yet. However, many of the new children who are coming in from other star systems are already at that level, and they can only be born here through a light conception process. They could not arrive here in any other way. Kathy, and there will be many of them? Ilariel, there will soon be many more light-conceived children, so perhaps it's just as well that we have explored this today. Kathy, how will you tell whether a person is light-conceived? Ilariel, you will feel the energy, and in time, you will get to know exactly how this energy feels. You'll get to feel it, and you will recognize it. Kathy, so coming back to the DNA, presumably the spirit of Jeshua, having been born as a human before, there would be certain characteristics that the angelic team wanted to put into physical form via this process of light conception. Is that right? And Ilariel says, Jeshua had other incarnations before, but he had balanced his karma. So there were no limitations that he needed to be put into the physical body. In the Christ letters, he actually says he was Muhammad, the Prophet Muhammad of Islam. Kathy, so when he was coming down as a man born of a woman, how would certain male characteristics come in? Like, for example, whether he could have a beard or not, whether he had red hair or brown hair. How were these things chosen, or was it all at random? Oh, and another one is that he was an Aryan race in a previous life as well, a warrior, a fighter. And let's see, sorry, I totally just threw that out there. So Ilariel's answer to the issue about having a beard or not, what color hair you would have. And he says, there was a process of choice in these characteristics, but this choice was exercised for Jeshua at the angelic level before all the main process of incarnation began. Kathy, so how did the angels come to make these choices? Did they have a committee meeting? Ilarial, there was a meeting in which it was all decided. It would have been appropriate, for example, that he should have brown hair rather than blonde hair, given the region he was about to incarnate in. And it was appropriate that he would be fairly tall rather than very short. Kathy, well, he wouldn't have been so effective as a public speaker if he had been very short. And Ilarial says yes. Many choices were made simply because it was appropriate. This was generally agreed, and if you like, the blueprint for the incarnation process was agreed at the angelic level. But the spirit had to implement that blueprint, had to make sure that the blueprint was translated into the reality of the DNA, which became the reality of the child. Kathy, what was Mary Magdalene's part in the process of light conception? What did she do to begin this whole process? Ilarial, it was Mary's focused intent, allied with the intent of Jeshua, that initiated the process. Their objective was to provide a pure lineage through which advanced beings could incarnate upon the earth, a channel through which the initiates of love and light could manifest. To open a gateway for a series of light-conceived beings, like a great chain of light reaching into the future, is a noble venture, and it received the immediate support and help of the angelic realm. Through intent, through prayer, and through invoking angelic aid, Jeshua and Mary Magdalene set in train the events which led to the creation of a light-conceived child. Kathy, can we go into the 12 levels of encodement? Oh, that's a deep one. Ilarial, there are 12 gateways in the DNA process, each gateway controlled by encodement. Passing through a gateway gives access to the next stage in the process, and all 12 gateways have to be passed through before light conception can occur. It would be very difficult for us to explain exactly how these 12 gateways work, because you have no vocabulary in this area. Joanna, because it's a language of light. And Ilarial says yes, and it's both subtle and vast. If you only knew how vast all this is, even how vast your own DNA is, you already know that it contains traces from your ancestral past, tendencies, limitations, tendencies towards weakness and disease, and so on. You know something of the history carrying side of your DNA. And if you put that alongside the present functioning of your DNA within your lifetime, that is a beginning. But there is also the ability of DNA to be a blueprint for your future, to outline the development of consciousness on many levels. If you put all that together, then you begin to see how vast your DNA is. Many of the higher levels of DNA are multidimensional. They're not physical at all, and they go way up into consciousness. They are there as a blueprint, a pattern of your future development. They trace your rise into higher vibrational living. They trace your rise into ascension and beyond. You have a vast amount of learning and growing to do. That is why you have a vast amount of DNA. Kathy says absolutely, and Ilarial says, it's not junk DNA, whatever they tell you. Everything is there for a purpose. Kathy, have we asked everything that Stuart needs to know to write about light conception? Ilarial says, yes, we have, and we're very grateful to you for teasing out the elements of this subject. Stuart could not have done this on his own. He doesn't have the training and background in biology that you have. Joanna, but that's why we're working as a team. And Ilarial says, indeed. All your jigsaw pieces fit together to make the greater picture. And Kathy says, thank you. And then we just have a little note here from the authors. This had been an astounding session with so much new information coming from it. The implications of this statement by Ilarial are far-reaching and profound. If the descendants of Mary Magdalene now living are genetically her descendants and not those of Jeshua, since the father contributes no physical level DNA to the process of light conception, then this puts the whole idea of a sacred bloodline into an entirely new context. What we can see emerging here is a spiritual understanding which transcends the early, more materialistic perception. Whilst some people might consider the genetic descendants of Jeshua to be ideal candidates as national sovereigns, a deeper understanding reveals a more advanced perspective that is not concerned with dynastic succession or temporal power. Note, after we had completed this chapter, we started researching material on DNA, and the most advanced information we found was from Cryon at www.cryon.com/seminar. And I think I mentioned Cryon in an earlier video because they mentioned Cryon in an earlier chapter. His real name is Lee Carroll, but he has been channeling this he says he's Cryon from Magnetic Service for, I want to say 30 or 40 years, and he's simply brilliant. And he's also shared with us many, many things that have already come to fruition. But he is a very loving and open being, I guess you could say, being of light or entity, however you'd like to refer to it. All right, so that completes chapter 20. And in the next chapter, we're going to read, it's a pretty short chapter, but it's named after the book, The Power of the Magdalene. So chapter 21 is The Power of the Magdalene. It's about 3 pages long. And then we go into the next part of our book. So yeah, we'll stop right there. Thank you all very much for joining me. I love you all so much. And until I see you again, take care of you and take care of those around you. Bye-bye.